Brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد المصطفى وعلى آله الأصفياء وأصحابه الأتقياء والتابعين لهم بخير وإحسان إلى يوم الجزاء. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Beloved brothers and sisters in Islam, as well as those who are watching of other faiths, we are remembering history today. An unfortunate history, but from history things can be learned, and from a people who don't learn from history, they are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. And 13 years ago, on April 28th, 2009, an African-American Imam in Detroit, Imam Luqman Abdullah rahmatullahi alayhi, was killed by the FBI along with the Joint Terrorism Task Force that was giving support in Dearborn, Michigan. So that was October 28th, 2009. And we discussed this issue for a couple of reasons. The first of these reasons is that many people in our community actually don't even know that this event took place. You think about 13 years ago, we have students who are in university now who actually were too young to even remember when this happened. This is number one. So this is an issue of American history, as Imam Luqman Abdullah, to our knowledge and understanding, is the first mainstream religious leader in the United States of America that was killed, was a victim of homicide by the Federal Bureau of Investigations. This is the first thing. The second reason is to learn the lessons, the contemporary lessons in regards to us as a Muslim community and the issue of the surveillance state, and how there are certain entities that still work in our community who are seeking still to use informants, confidential informants, the issue of people trying to get people to spy in our community, to inform on people in the community in the surveillance state, as well as we can say the addendum to that is the issue that's been more in discussion in the American discourse in the last few years, especially with the tragic homicide of George Floyd. But it also brings into the contemporary issue of extrajudicial killings by law enforcement, and particularly of Black Americans. So this issue has two shades to it in terms of the killing of Imam Luqman. So let me also say from the onset that a couple of other things before I get into some of the timeline on what we did at CAIR Michigan working on this case. Of the first of these, which this case is probably the most, this case carries the most weight probably of all the issues I've dealt with as an advocate and as an activist in my history in the Michigan community. And I knew Imam Luqman personally. We actually traveled together. We shared hotel room together. In the past, I prayed with him and behind him. So this issue has a level of personal interest to myself, besides knowing his family. But besides this, that this particular issue and how we dealt with it really showed the reality of a number of things inside our community here in the state of Michigan. And hopefully we can learn from these things and grow from some of these unfortunate missteps that were made in the past after Imam Luqman was killed. So when we go back 13 years ago, Imam Luqman's community was infiltrated by no less than 3 confidential informants. This is according to the government's own records, at least 3 confidential informants. One of them acting as an agent provocateur, going by the name of Jabril. And his picture is actually online, and you can Google it and look it up. And to be aware that if this person is in our community here in Michigan or anywhere else, that we need to be aware of actually who is within our community. He's a white male who claimed to have converted to Islam with a tattoo on his neck. Was acting as a agent provocateur within the community. There was a staged raid that took place on October 20th, 2009 in a warehouse in East Dearborn. And the charges against some members in the community, in which Imam Luqman drove this confidential informant to the warehouse that day, was a claim of that the community members were involved in a conspiracy to sell stolen goods. So obviously, it wasn't stolen goods. Number one, it was conspiracy because the government paid for everything. The government paid for the warehouse. The government paid for all of the goods that was being used for the mech trucks. So the trucks that were coming in, moving goods, the pallets, everything was paid for by our taxpayer dollars. Over $1 million operation that went on for years, as a means of trying to. The claim was that the community and members were trying to sell stolen goods in order that they could establish a Sharia or establish Islamic sacred law in the in one of the poorest zip codes in the United States of America. A very a masjid that was struggling sometimes to even keep the lights on, and the heat was allegedly trying to establish a Sharia in off of Joy Road and off of Claremont on the west side of Detroit. So this was the allegation. Nonetheless, the that day the FBI flew in a special technical team from the FBI from Quantico, which is a Marine base in Virginia. They are a specialized group that is involved in um, basically counterterrorism operations. They brought in them along with the Joint Terrorism Task Force, Dearborn Police, Detroit Police, Michigan State Police, Immigration Customs Enforcement to effect an arrest on Imam Luqman and 3 other people inside of that warehouse, claiming that they were involved in stolen goods, in which community members told us that they believe that this white man who was posing as a Muslim was operating a legit commercial warehouse, um, moving things, offering jobs to people who are poor, some of them returning citizens. Nonetheless, that task force that was brought in with over 80 law enforcement officers, including an FBI attack dog and a helicopter, came into the warehouse after the agent provocateur excused himself. The special technical team from Quantico Marine Base, the FBI technical squad came in, guns drawn. They let go of the dog. We have pictures of Imam Luqman's corpse. The dog began to maul the Imam, bit into his face, bit his body, deep bite marks. They claim that the Imam had a gun and pulled a gun out and shot the dog, which then they claim that the dog represents a law enforcement officer, and then they shot the Imam 20 times. So this is what they claim, right? That he pulled out a gun and shot the dog named Freddie. What then took place is that the Imam was bleeding out. He was shot in his back. He was shot in his testicles. Then the officers handcuffed him, and they saw their dog was shot. So instead of using their helicopter to fly the imam to a hospital for medical attention, they instead put the dog on the helicopter, flew the dog to Macomb County from Dearborn so that the dog can get treatment. Imam Luqman bled out. He died, or he was martyred. And then Freddie the dog ended up dying. By the way, they gave a plaque to that dog. Now, the FBI did not let the Dearborn police into the scene for at least an hour. The so-called special technical team took the alleged gun supposedly that Imam Luqman had, and they took it back with them and flew back immediately to Washington, D.C. And by the time the police were let in an hour later, they didn't even get any interviews of the actual shooters. There were 4 shooters. They didn't even get a chance to interview them. Actually, they were interviewed months later, and they all were lawyered up under the same attorney. Imam Luqman, he's taken for an autopsy report. There's pictures taken of him and his corpse. There was no proof of any gunpowder underneath his fingers. If you shoot a firearm, that there's some blowback and there's some gunpowder, right? Months later, the so-called gun that Imam Luqman had, they claim he had, none of Imam Luqman's fingerprints were on that gun. None of his DNA were on that gun. He was bleeding quite profusely. Not a speck of his blood was on that gun. We hold at CAIR, Michigan, that the FBI wrongfully killed Imam Luqman. We don't believe he had a gun. We believe they shot their dog and killed their dog. And when they killed Imam Luqman, a necropsy report was done on that dog, Freddie the dog. And there was no conclusive evidence that the so-called throw weapon, we believe, but the so-called gun that Imam Luqman had, that it matched the caliber of the bullet that actually went into the dog. So we believe that it was wrongful death and that the FBI was involved in a cover-up when they killed Imam Luqman. Now, before getting to some of the actions that we took at CAIR, Michigan, you might say, well, why would they target Imam Luqman? So there's an outward reason, and there's something that we believe is beneath the surface. Outwardly speaking, the FBI regularly sends informants into the Muslim community. People make their careers off of this. As a matter of fact, we know from former FBI agent Michael German, who worked for the ACLU, at the Brennan Center, that special agents that work for the FBI have to cultivate sources. They have to get a minimum amount of informants, that they recruit informants and then to open up investigations. So people make their careers in FBI. People keep their jobs, much as get promoted, have to cultivate and have to send informants in the communities. And of course, perhaps it may have simmered down some in the last couple of years with the rise of white supremacist terrorists and white national extremists. But since 9/11, the focal point of a so-called counterterrorism in America has been the Muslim community. In southeastern Michigan, Metro Detroit has been one of the hot spots, given that this is perhaps the most concentrated area or the most concentrated population of Muslims in America, with about 300,000 Muslims in this metropolitan area. New York City has the most Muslims as far as gross numbers, but New York City is way larger than the city of New York, than the city of Detroit, when we're talking about the 5 boroughs, and then if you were to include Long Island, as well as New Rochelle and Yonkers. Now, when we're talking about this particular issue, this is one issue that they tried to send in the informants to try to catch so-called terroristic activity. Of course, there was none. Even in the affidavit in which the informants were secretly recording Imam Luqman, in one particular issue when the Super Bowl took place here in Detroit years ago, one of the informants was trying to tell Imam Luqman, well, let's launch an attack against Ford Field and attack the Super Bowl. And Imam Luqman said, no, this we don't do this in Islam. That attacking innocent people, attacking civilians is un-Islamic. Like this is even recorded. But the FBI continued with their scheme and with trying to entrap people inside the community. The second reason is, and this was in the criminal affidavit, that Imam Luqman was very close, and in fact, one of the chief fundraisers for the appeal of Imam Jamil El-Amin, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, aka H. Brown, that had been under government surveillance by the FBI and dirty tricks since the counterintelligence program of J. Edgar Hoover. This is well known. They tried to set up Imam Jamil before, and Imam Jamil is wrongfully incarcerated right now for killing a police officer. And of course, there's been a person who's confessed actually that he was the killer. Imam Jamil doesn't even fit the description of the killer, not unless you think all black men look alike. Nonetheless, Imam Jamil, who's been a target of the U.S. government since the late 60s, when he was with SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and he also, of course, was in close relations with Martin Luther King Jr., who of course was assassinated. This was mentioned in the criminal affidavit, that they said that Imam Luqman had a relationship with former Black Power, Black Panther leader H. Brown, aka Imam Jamil El-Amin, was a cop killer. So they mentioned this even though Imam Jamil had been in prison since 2000, or been arrested since 2000. He was convicted in 2001. This event took place all the way back in 2018. They wove this in the criminal affidavit in regards to their targeting of Imam Luqman Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh. So this is some of the background about his targeting and his community being targeted by the FBI. Now, it's a very long story in regards to all the work that we did on this case at CAIR, Michigan, but basically we filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Federal Bureau of Investigations, in which them and the Justice Department, and by the way, this was under the Obama administration, right? And part of the whole issue of the fall civil rights investigation that was led by Tom Perez, who was the head of the Civil Rights Division. I think he's still the head of the DNC, and he served another position in the Obama administration. This happened under the governance and the cover-up of a Democrat-led administration. And I have to say this again, that Malcolm X, rahmatullahi alayh, he mentioned the issue of the wolf and the fox, that the conservatives are the wolves and the so-called liberals are the foxes, and that the fox is more likely to get the lamb chop than the wolf if you have sheep and trying to protect your sheep. And some of the biggest and grossest civil rights violations against Muslims took place under the Obama administration of Barack Hussein Obama, right? So this whole thing about, just because someone's a Democrat, that they're more of our allies and Republicans, we need to be a little more wise about that and be more about principles than personalities and parties, right? And we as CAIR Michigan, we are a non-political organization. We are neither left nor right. We're neither so-called progressive or so-called conservative. We stand for the religious rights of our community, including when so-called progressives or so-called liberals infringe upon our religious rights, and actually our right to exist, right? So we filed this lawsuit. Number one, we had to name the shooters as John Does because the FBI was covering up the names of the shooters. So basically in legal proceedings, you have something called standing, right? In other words, there has to be real people who are named for the wrongful death suit. So then the government argued that we didn't have standing because we didn't um, list particular names. Then we tried to refile the lawsuit, naming the head of the technical team, who wasn't a trigger man, as well as the former head of the FBI, Andy Arena. And then by the time that came, then the government argued, well, we uh, can't file a lawsuit now because they said that we went past the statute of limitations for filing the lawsuit. They literally blocked us all throughout the way, and us trying to get discovery, us trying to get information. So this never went to trial. The federal judge said that on a technicality, he couldn't hear our case. We appealed it to the appellate court as in Cincinnati. They refused our appeal. So, in other words, the actual merits of the wrongful death lawsuit and the cover up never were able to make it to court. We then filed a petition with the Supreme Court. And besides our staff attorney at the time, who's now national litigation director at CAIR National, we also had the help of attorney Sharif Akil. In this case, in this filing, the Supreme Court refused to hear our case. And then we have no more legal recourse as far as holding people accountable with the Federal Bureau of Investigations. And there's many more shenanigans that I could talk about as far as with the Detroit police, the Dearborn police blocking information, former Chief Ron Haddad. Um, there's a number of other things that we could mention in regards to this, as well as the media smearing of Imam Luqman that took place, at least in the very beginning. Um, there's much more that could be said, but contemporary, why is this important? Okay. Number one, we at CAIR Michigan still get regular calls about FBI visits and the FBI visiting people. And as I mentioned before about the cultivation of informants, see, the I is an FBI for a reason. It means investigation. Doesn't mean it's not, and the F doesn't mean friends. The F doesn't mean friends. So there's an issue of the cultivation of informants that still goes on in our community. And who gets cultivated to be informants? First of all, FBI informants are not patriots. They're not patriots. It's either someone who has a legal problem, they themselves are about to get time, and or to get out of there going to prison. Sometimes for crimes worse than the so-called crimes, alleged crimes that are being investigated, these people are made informants. Number two, they have immigration issue. So someone's about to face deportation, they come say, "Oh, we can help you with your status if you inform on your imam, if you inform on your sheikh, if you inform on the sayyid, if you inform inside of this community organization," right? Then the third reason is for money, where they see people who, let's say, I know this one issue of a brother I know personally. He's about to lose his home. So they come and say, "Oh, well, if you help us out, we know that you are in need of some money and about to lose your house." See, so this is the way that they operate, and this is why we tell the community that we are not anti law enforcement, but we are against law enforcement abuse, and in that we are not in favor of mass surveillance and fishing expeditions within inside of our community. And uh, they don't the FBI doesn't call for special meetings with, and this is a part of the political naivety of some of our people, including some people who are supposedly leaders in the Muslim community. The FBI doesn't go to uh, white Catholic churches and say, "Oh, we need to have a special relationship." They don't go to other religious communities and say, "We need to have a special relationship and keep the lines of communication open." They do that with us because they see that as that we're a suspect community. So we have no obligation to have any special relationship with the FBI. They work for the taxpayers, supposed to do their job. If there's a threat against our community, hate crime, a threat, they're supposed to do their job when we pick up the phone and call them as a community, right? Or if there's some sort of threat. But there's no need for us to have some sort of special relationship to invite them over to our homes for dinner, to try to get them to have a special relationship with the imams. They're not having a special relationship with priests, right, or nuns. A special relationship with rabbis that you need to check in on, right, or a guru. It's the Muslims that they've been treating as a suspect community, right? So this is why we tell people about their rights, and that the FBI, they're not our friends. They're supposed to do their job, and it's not that, and it's we have no moral obligation to have any special relationship with them. Especially, we know the history of how the FBI was set up and what they've been doing, not only to our rights but to other communities. And if you're Black and Muslim, that's double targeting. That's double targeting, especially if you're involved in some sort of activism, right? In regards to the issue of law enforcement accountability, we've seen this with officers all throughout America, from police forces to the FBI, uh, about the need for reform of law enforcement and to get rid of this issue called, qualified immunity. That basically law enforcement officers can shoot people and kill people, and then when families sue for wrongful death, then instead of the actual killers being held responsible and having to pay some of the money, it comes out of the taxpayer funds, or it comes from some sort of insurance, liability insurance that the city has. No, law enforcement agents, be they Border Patrol, be they the Detroit Police, Michigan State Police, the FBI, ATF, if they knew that they didn't have that legal protection, if they shot some people and wrongfully killed them, that they could be sued and lose their homes or lose their pensions for wrongfully murdering someone. Because see, you can get money back, but you can't get someone's life back. If they knew that, then perhaps that would slow down, or at least give some sort of incentive, or we could say consequences, to cut down their brutality and cut down on their killing of Black folk, or any sort of folk, brown folk too, right? So this is why we at CAIR Michigan, again, we stand for the rights of our community. If the FBI comes to your home, or to your place of business, we encourage you to contact our office immediately. We will give you assistance and intake. You are under no legal obligation to let them into your home without them having a search warrant with your proper address, signed by a judge. This is just for educational purposes. I'm telling you this right now. Contact our office, and our numbers on the website. And then number two, this is why we advocate and organize around higher levels of police accountability. The George Floyd uh, Law Enforcement Accountability Act should have been passed after uh, that lynching took place in Minneapolis. That killing took place in Minneapolis, and this is why we, along with other civil rights organizations, other organizations involved in police accountability, are against this issue, as well as um, supporters of the reintroduction of what the late John Conyers put forward of ERPA, the End Racially Profiling Act, that would help our community. In saying that, Saturday, my brothers and sisters, Saturday morning, we we will be there as we have been every year since the killing of Imam Luqman. This will be the 13th year in a row since his killing, at Knollwood Cemetery this Saturday at 10 a.m., and this is in Canton. This is where Imam Luqman Rahmatullah alayh is buried, and family, friends, other people in the community come out for an annual ziyarah. Also, Imam Salim Joseph is buried there as well, close by him, Rahmatullah alayh. And we, you know, read Yasin, make dua for him, and have some of the family members there to share their words, reflections about their father. I'm usually every year I've been one of the speakers as well. We only didn't do it for 1 year. People went individually, and that was the first year of the COVID situation. But we do this as this is the right of our brother, that we go there and we pray for him, and then also we do this to keep this story alive, and you know, to keep this keep the lessons alive and transmit it and pass down to younger generations about what happened to Imam Luqman. He was a man that fed the poor. He was a man that looked after returning citizens. Um, you know, he had good relations with many facets of the Muslim community. He had given the Khutbah al-Jama'ah the week before he was murdered at Iona Masjid, where Amir Mustafa Turk is the leader at. He taught a number of the people. He used to teach in Canton, the weekend school. A lot of professionals now who are South Asian learned from him when they were kids, when they were young. So he was a man who had respect in the community. And we ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept him amongst the shuhada. We ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to assist and help his family. We ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us and protect our community from police brutality, from law enforcement brutality. We ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from the schemes of spies, informants, and agent provocateurs. And we ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us at CAIR, Michigan, to increase our sustenance, our financial sustenance, as well as our human resources, that we may continue to do this valuable work. And we hope to see you Saturday morning at 10 a.m. at Knollwood Cemetery in Canton, Michigan, with the permission of our Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.